Welcome to Study Hall. We're all about making art a little less huh and a lot more aha. And today, well, we've got an artist who's famous for both, ready to unlock the secrets of René Magritte.
Oh yeah, he's the guy who can make a pipe, well, not a pipe,
And don't even get me started on those bowler hats.
falling from the sky apparently.
Okay, so maybe not literally, but that's the kind of world Magritte creates, right? This mind-bending reality where nothing is quite what it seems.
Exactly.
So we've got his biography here, some art analysis essays, and a few of his own quotes to guide us. Where do we even begin with someone who seems to defy logic?
Well, funny you should ask that. One of his quotes actually kind of sums up his whole deal. He said, "Everything we see hides another thing."
All right, I'm already intrigued. Is he talking about art? Life in general? Tell me we're about to go full detective mode on this guy.
Oh, we absolutely are. And you know, the first clue might just be the most heartbreaking. When Magritte was only 13, his mother tragically took her own life.
That's right. I remember reading about that. It's always mentioned in relation to his work.
And for good reason. It's a detail that's both deeply sad and, in a way, almost foreshadowing. She was found with her face covered by her nightgown.
Wow, I didn't know that detail. Yeah, that definitely casts a different light on his art, especially knowing how often he uses those veiled faces or objects that are partially hidden.
Exactly. His art became a way of exploring that hidden nature of reality, trying to uncover what lies beneath the surface, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally see that. So we have this early trauma, this sense of hidden meanings, and then he goes and paints these incredibly realistic images, like that clash between the ordinary and the strange. That's what makes his work so captivating.
Right. He doesn't need, melting clocks or distorted figures to create a surreal experience. It's all about taking things we see every day and twisting them just enough to make us question what we're actually looking at.
Like in the treachery of images. Right. I mean, that's got to be one of his most famous pieces. You've got this perfectly normal pipe just sitting there, and then underneath it he writes, "This is not a pipe." Is he just messing with us at that point?
Well, on one level, yeah, he's definitely playing with our expectations, but there's a deeper point there, too. He's making us think about the relationship between an image and the object it represents, you know?
It's like he's saying a picture of a pipe isn't the same thing as an actual pipe you can smoke.
Precisely. He's highlighting that language and images are both systems of representation. They can point to reality, but they're not reality itself. It's a really clever way to make us question how we perceive the world around us.
Man, I'm starting to see why he's considered such a mind-bending artist. It's not just creating pretty pictures, it's making us think.
Exactly. And the treachery of images, that's just one example. He does this over and over again in his work. Let's take a look at another iconic piece, The Son of Man.
Oh yeah, the guy with the apple covering his face. It's such a simple image, yet it's so strange and intriguing at the same time.
Right. And again, we see that motif of concealment. Something hiding beneath the surface. That apple blocking the man's face. It forces to ask, what's he hiding? What's he thinking? Who is he even?
And you can't help but wonder if that image connects back to his mother's death. You know, the nightgown covering her face. It's like he's saying there's always something more than meets the eye, always a layer of a mystery to uncover.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to one of the core reasons behind Magritte's art. To make us question our assumptions about the world, to sort of jolt us out of our complacency and make us really see things for the first time.
He wanted us to think differently, to see the world through a surreal lens. And he did that by using these everyday objects and situations, things we take for granted, and just twisting them just enough to create that sense of wonder and unease.
Exactly. Think about Golconda, for example.
Okay, Golconda. That's the one with the businessmen raining down from the sky.
Yeah.
Right? Every time I see that image, I can't help but smile.
It's so absurd, and yet it works. He takes these symbols of conformity, these businessmen in their identical bowler hats, and just places them in this utterly impossible situation.
So it's funny, but it also makes you think about individuality and conformity, right? Like, are these men all the same, or are they unique individuals despite their similar appearances?
Exactly. Magritte is inviting us to ask those questions, to challenge our assumptions about identity and society. And that's what makes him so brilliant. He manages to combine humor, intellectual depth, and visual impact all in one.
Yeah, he really had this knack for, making us see the familiar in a completely new light. But let's not forget, Magritte wasn't just about, visual trickery. There was this deep philosophical current running through his work, too.
I was just about to ask about that. You mentioned he was interested in things like existentialism and phenomenology, right?
Right.
Those sound pretty heavy. How do those ideas actually play out in his paintings? Well, let's start with phenomenology. Basically, it's the study of experience, like how we perceive and make sense of the world around us.
Okay, yeah, I'm following so far.
So Magritte, he was fascinated by the idea that our perceptions, they aren't always reliable, that the way we see things, well, it's shaped by our preconceived notions and cultural biases, all that stuff.
Which is exactly what he's doing in his paintings, right?
Hmm.
Messing with our perceptions,
Yeah.
making us question what we think we know.
Exactly. He's forcing us to confront the limitations of our own senses and the subjective nature of reality. And then there's existentialism, which kind of emphasizes individual freedom, responsibility, and the search for meaning in a seemingly meaningless world.
And how does that tie into Magritte's art?
Well, you see, a lot of his paintings, they deal with these themes of isolation, alienation, and that search for identity. Think about the Son of Man again, that faceless figure with the apple blocking his identity. It could be seen as a metaphor for the existential struggle to define oneself in a world that often feels absurd and chaotic.
Wow. I never thought of it that way before. It's like he's saying we're all searching for meaning, trying to make sense of our existence, and sometimes it feels like we're just, I don't know, groping in the dark, hidden behind a veil of our own making.
Yeah, that's a really insightful interpretation. And it highlights the fact that Magritte's work isn't just about visual puzzles and mind games. It's about exploring these fundamental questions about the human condition.
Okay, I have to ask, did Magritte ever explicitly say what he was trying to achieve with his art? Or was he content to let people just come up with their own interpretations?
Well, he definitely had his own ideas about the purpose of art, but he was also kind of wary of being too prescriptive. He didn't want to tell people what to think or feel. He wanted them to experience his work on their own terms.
Yeah, that makes sense. He wanted to provoke thought, not dictate answers.
Exactly. He once said, and this is a good one, "The mind loves the unknown. It loves images whose meaning is unknown, since the meaning of the mind itself is unknown."
Whoa. Okay, that's deep. So it sounds like he was embracing the mystery, acknowledging that there are some things we just can't fully explain or understand.
Absolutely, and that's part of what makes his work so enduring. It invites us to participate in the mystery, to keep searching for meaning, even if we never fully arrive at a definitive answer.
So it's less about finding the right answer and more about asking the right questions.
Precisely. He was more interested in sparking our curiosity and imagination than in providing us with, like, a neat and tidy explanation of the world.
Yeah, no, that's so refreshing. Especially in a world that's obsessed with easy answers and quick fixes. Magritte's like, hey, it's okay to embrace the unknown, to revel in the mystery of it all.
For sure.
Speaking of beauty and wonder, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Magritte's artistic techniques.
Yeah.
How did he actually create these mind-bending images? What were some of his signature moves?
Well, one of his most notable techniques is his use of trompe-l'œil, which is French for deceive the eye. Ah. Okay, so that's how he achieves that hyper-realistic, almost photographic quality in his work, right? Like, I know it's a painting, but it feels like I could reach out and touch those objects.
Exactly. He was a master of creating the illusion of three-dimensionality on a flat canvas.
So it's not just about the strange subject matter, it's also about the way he paints it.
Absolutely. The way he renders light, shadow, and texture, it all adds another layer of surrealism to his work, makes the impossible seem almost plausible.
Okay, so we have trompe-l'œil. What else is in Magritte's artistic toolbox?
Well, he was also a big fan of juxtaposition.
Juxtaposition. Refresh my memory. What does that mean again?
It's basically placing two or more contrasting elements side by side, to create a surprising or thought-provoking effect.
Oh, right. Like in Time Transfixed, where he's got that steam locomotive bursting out of a fireplace.
Exactly. It's such a bizarre and unexpected image, and it makes you stop and think, wait, what's going on here? How did that train get in there? Classic Magritte, right? Making us question the logic of everyday life, blurring the lines between reality and dreams.
Precisely. He uses juxtaposition to create a sense of disorientation, to make us question our assumptions about the world and how things are supposed to work.
Another thing I've noticed in his work is that he plays around with scale and proportion, like in Personal Values, where he's got this giant comb and wine glass towering over a tiny bed and a matchstick-sized man.
Oh, that's a great example. He's taking everyday objects and either enlarging them to monumental proportions or shrinking them down to miniature size. It's another way of disorienting the viewer and challenging our perceptions of space and reality.
And again, it's funny, but it also makes you think, Like, what does it mean to have your personal values represented by a giant comb? What does that say about our priorities?
Exactly. Magritte is always inviting us to look beyond the surface, to consider the multiple layers of meaning embedded in his images.
Okay, so we've got trompe l'oeil, juxtaposition, and playing with scale and proportion. Any other tricks up his sleeve?
Well, he was also a master of symbolism. He'd often use these recurring motifs like bowler hats, apples, clouds, and birds to represent certain ideas or concepts.
Right, like the bowler hat and the Son of Man, which
Yeah.
would symbolize anonymity or conformity.
Exactly. And the apple, which often appears, obscuring faces, could represent hidden knowledge or the forbidden fruit of temptation. He's creating this visual language, a code that we have to decipher to understand the deeper meaning of his work.
It's like he's giving us clues, inviting us to play detective and piece together the puzzle of his art.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of engaging with Magritte. He doesn't give us all the answers. He wants us to think for ourselves, to come up with our own interpretations.
So he was a master of technique, a philosopher at heart, and a bit of a trickster, too. No wonder his work continues to fascinate and intrigue us all these years later.
Yeah, it feels like we've uncovered so many layers of meaning in his work already. But I'm curious, what kind of impact did Magritte have on the art world after he was gone? Did he inspire other artists, spark any new movements?
Oh, absolutely. He might not have single-handedly started a whole new art movement, but his influence, it's like this secret ingredient that you find popping up in all sorts of unexpected places.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the inside scoop on Magritte's legacy.
All right, so think about pop art. Those bold, colorful works that often feature everyday objects or images from popular culture.
Right, like Andy Warhol's soup cans and Roy Lichtenstein's comic book style.
Exactly. Now, it might seem like a bit of a jump from those to Magritte's, more subtle and surreal imagery. But when you look closer, you can see the connection. Both Magritte and the pop artists, they were fascinated by the power of familiar images, and they both used those images in ways that challenged, traditional notions of what art could be.
So Magritte was already playing with these ideas of taking ordinary things and making them extraordinary long before pop art came along.
Exactly. He was a pioneer in that sense. And his influence doesn't stop there. Conceptual art, which emerged in the 1960s, also owes a debt to Magritte.
Conceptual art. That's the stuff that's more about the idea behind the artwork than the artwork itself, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not even a physical object, just a concept or an instruction.
You got it. And Magritte's work, with its emphasis on questioning perceptions and blurring those lines between language and imagery, well, it was a precursor to a lot of those conceptual ideas.
So even though he wasn't running around calling himself a conceptual artist, his work paved the way for that whole movement.
Precisely. And his influence continues to ripple through contemporary art today. You can see traces of Magritte in the work of artists like John Baldessari, who's known for his witty and thought-provoking pieces that often incorporate text and imagery, and Ed Risha, who also plays with language and imagery in his paintings and photographs.
It's amazing to think that a painter who was working in the early to mid-20th century is still influencing artists today. It speaks to the timelessness of his ideas, doesn't it?
It really does. He tapped into something fundamental about human nature, about the way we see the world and make meaning out of it. And those questions, well, they're just as relevant today, maybe even more so in our image-saturated, hyper-connected world.
I'm starting to see why we're doing a deep dive on Magritte. It's not just about art history. It's about understanding the world around us, the way we think, the way we perceive.
Exactly. Magritte's work is like a lens that helps us see things more clearly, to question what we take for granted, and to, appreciate the mystery and absurdity of it all.
But let's be real for a second. A lot of people probably see Magritte's work and they think, that's cool, but what does it all mean? How would you answer that question? Why should we care about René Magritte today?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, I think there are as many answers as there are viewers. But for me, one of the biggest reasons Magritte matters is that he teaches us to be more critical thinkers.
Critical thinkers?
Yeah.
In what way?
Well, he's constantly challenging us to question what we see, to look beyond the surface of things, to not just accept things at face value. And in a world where we're bombarded with information from all sides, that skill, it's more important than ever.
Right. We're constantly being manipulated by images, by advertising, by social media. Magritte gives us the tools to see through those manipulations, to question the messages we're being fed.
Exactly. He's like a trainer for our brains, helping us develop those critical thinking muscles so we can navigate the complexities of the world around us.
And it's not just about being skeptical, right? Magritte also reminds us to find the wonder and beauty in the everyday, to see the poetry in a green apple, the mystery in a bowler hat, the absurdity in a businessman raining down from the sky.
He expands our definition of what's possible, both in art and in life. He encourages us to embrace the unexpected, to find joy in the absurd, and to never stop questioning the world around us.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. René Magritte, the artist who taught us to see the world with fresh eyes, to embrace the mystery, and to never stop questioning.
A true master of the unexpected.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of René Magritte. We'll see you next time for another exploration of art, ideas, and all things fascinating.